Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki, Gornitai ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 40, and there are two texts for today, text 29 and text 30, which will bring us to the end of this chapter, chapter 40. So we can chant the first of the two verses together. So it's text 29, Canto 10, Chapter 40, text 29. Namo Vijnana Matraya Sarva Pratyaya Hetave Purushesha Pradhanaya Brahmane Nanta Shaktaye Namo Vijnana Matraya Sarve Pratyaya Hetave Purushesha Pradhanaya Brahmane Nante Shaktaye Namo Vijnana Matraya Sarve Pratyaya Hetave Purushesha Pradhanaya Brahmane Nanta Shaktaye. Please chant. Namo Vijnana Matraya Sarva Pratyaya Hetave Purushesha Pradhanaya Brahmane Nanta Shaktaye. Namo Vijnana Matraya Sarva Pratyaya Hetave Purushesha Pradhanaya Brahmane Nanta Shaktaye. And the word for word, Namaha, obeisances, Vijnana, of pure knowledge, Matraya, to the embodiment, Sarve, of all, Pratyaya, forms of knowledge, Hetave, to the source, Purusha, of a person, Isha, the controlling forces, Pradhanaya, to him who predominates, Brahmane, to the supreme absolute truth, Ananta, unlimited, Shaktaye, who protects, Let me see, sorry. Oh, whose potencies? Sorry. Okay, in text 30. Namaste Vasudevaya Sarvabhuta Shayaya Cha Hrishikesha Namaslubhyam Prapanam Pahimam Prabho. The translation for text 30. Huh? Oh, sorry, thank you. Translation for 29. Obeisances to the Supreme Absolute Truth, the possessor of unlimited energies. He is the embodiment of pure transcendental knowledge, the source of all kinds of awareness, and the predominator of the forces of nature that rule over the living being. And text 30 translation. O son of Vasudeva, obeisances to you, within whom all living beings reside. O Lord of the mind and senses, again I offer you my obeisances. O Master, please protect me, who am surrendered unto you. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupa Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutan Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Padaswami Iti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation once again for 29. Obeisances to the Supreme Absolute Truth, the possessor of unlimited energies. He is the embodiment of pure transcendental knowledge, the source of all kinds of awareness, and the predominator of the forces of nature that rule over the living beings. In these two verses, text 29 and 30, Akura surrenders to Krishna's lotus feet. And there's a statement made by Krishna. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. So that's Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Bahunam janmanam ante Gyanavan mam prapadyate Vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. So Akura surrender implies, just based on Krishna's statement, that he's actually in knowledge of Krishna. So by way of explaining what it means to actually be in knowledge of Krishna, Srila Prabhupada makes the statement that a living entity, while executing devotional service, Um, or even transcendental rituals, after many births, may actually become situated in transcendental pure knowledge. So that knowledge is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. So Srila Prabhupada's explanation is that there's a progression for the living entity. Initially, a person may be attached to materialism, so he'll lean towards an impersonal view. And further along, in the process of executing devotional service or transcendental rituals, one will understand that there are activities in spiritual life and that these activities make up spiritual life. So there had been a mention of some of the transcendental rituals that Akura had been performing. So just a little bit earlier on, there was mentioned that he had taken, and this is quoting, his bath as enjoined in the scriptures. And there's, and also quoting, while immersing himself in the water and reciting mantras from the Vedas, Akura suddenly saw Balaram and Krishna before him. So that was the previous chapter, the 41st verse. So Akura had been meditating on a form with his personal mantra. So he had become fixed in that form of Krishna. And at that moment, because he hadn't been hearing the sweet words of the gopis anymore, he was already on his way traveling to take Krishna and Balaram to Mathura. He had again become fixed in chanting the Vedic Diksha mantra. And Krishna at that time showed him Vaikuntha. So this is actually this particular statement that Akura had been chanting his Diksha mantra, and at that time, that was the time when Krishna gave him the vision of Vaikuntha. That's coming from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Sarata Darshini. So Akura is indicating this understanding that Krishna is the source of all knowledge, because remember that was what Krishna is actually saying. He who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. So Akura is indicating that he has this understanding that Krishna is the source of all knowledge. Because he says, these are his words, he is the embodiment of pure transcendental knowledge. So he directly states it. And the words that were used in this verse that we chanted together, the second line, was saying exactly that, Sarvam Pradyaya Hetave. So he is the embodiment of pure transcendental knowledge. So Akura's words in Krishna book are more drawn out. So I'm going to read in Krishna book for this little section how Srila Prabhupada has translated Akura's words, or put Akura's words down in writing. My dear Lord, your transcendental eternal form is full of knowledge. Simply by concentrating one's mind upon your form, one can understand in full knowledge everything that be, because you are the original source of all knowledge. So clearly it's a transcendental relationship, meditating on the form of Krishna because he's the source of all knowledge. Just by meditating on that form, one also comes to have all knowledge. So that was from Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada expanding, which is interesting because you get to understand that even Akura's very words as put out by Srila Prabhupada are reinforcing this statement made by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that Akura had been meditating on a particular form of Lord Krishna, because he's saying simply by concentrating one's mind upon your form, one can understand in full knowledge everything that be. And so he's giving the insight into how this is happening. Krishna's saying, one who's actually knowledge surrenders unto me. So that's actually how it comes about, that meditation on a particular form of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, he outlines a sequence. So realizing that there are activities in spiritual life, because that's part of that progression that I described earlier on, that Srila Prabhupada was saying, going from a kind of impersonal view to actually coming to understand, oh, there's activities in spiritual life. So, and that these make up devotional service, and that a person becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through those activities, and then comes to that point of surrender. So at such a time, Srila Prabhupada continues, one can understand that Lord Krishna's mercy is everything, and that he's the cause of all causes, and that this material manifestation is not independent of him. So I'm drawing that from a purport of Srila Prabhupada's in Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Because I think it's particularly pertinent to what we're hearing from Akura. And earlier, Akura had prayed, I bow down to you, the cause of all causes, the original and inexhaustible Supreme Person, Narayan. From the whirl of the lotus born from your navel, Brahma appeared, and by his agency, this universe has come into being. So those were Akura's words earlier on himself, right at the beginning of this chapter that we're now ending. So by Akura's prayer, he indicates that the cause of everything is Brahma, whose cause is Narayan. So he has the understanding, the cause of all causes, who has this form, is an eternal person. That is without beginning and end. Now, Srila Vishwanath explains that Akura's praying has a subtext or an underlying view. And that subtext is quoting from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who's explaining something of that consciousness, the underlying understanding that's there. And these are his words as the Akura is speaking. I will be able to understand you in proportion to how much realization, that's vijnana, which we had read in today's verse, you give me to understand. So he's expressing what he's expressing, what we're hearing. I'm trying to break down what he's saying, but underlying all that is this understanding. I will be able to understand you in proportion to how much realization you give me to understand. So that's the vijnana. Now, this is in accord with Srila Prabhupada's explanation that a devotee in Akura's position has come to understand that Krishna's mercy is everything. So you can see how there's such a tight interconnection between what Krishna says, how Srila Prabhupada is breaking down a sequence, and also how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is analyzing Akura's position and what he's actually saying. Now, Akura continues, and I'm drawing again from Krishna book because this is Srila Prabhupada expanding a little bit on what we've reading are his words today. So this is quoting from Krishna book, and Akura speaking. You are the supreme powerful, possessing all kinds of energies. You are the supreme Brahman and the supreme person, supreme controller and master of the material energies. Close quote. So the words in text 29 read this way. Obeisances to the supreme absolute truth, the possessor of unlimited energies. So this position of Akura, with this understanding, puts him in the position of one of those who are situated in divine nature. That is, he's a Mahatma or a great soul. So he's fully situated in divine nature. So this position of being fully situated in the divine nature and therefore being a Mahatma or a great soul is explained in the book Rajavidya, King of Knowledge, chapter 4. The presence of Krishna in all aspects of creation is perceived by the great souls who are always engaged in the worship of Krishna. So automatically there's this ability to be able to perceive Krishna in all aspects of the creation, in that position of being completely within divine nature, being completely situated in that position. Now, those great souls, such as Akura, are conversant with the knowledge found in Bhagavad Gita naturally. And particularly chapter 9, because such great souls, they know Krishna to be the source of all things. And that was just uttered by Akura. So this is from Bhagavad Gita 9:13. Mahatmas tu mam partha divim prakritim ashrita bhajanti ananya manaso nyatva bhutadim avyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Now, Srila Prabhupada generalizes, and he states that one who surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, at once becomes freed from the control of material nature. In fact, you could say it's a formula. Surrender of one's soul to Krishna equals freedom from the control of material nature. And this means that then the living entity is under the guidance of the spiritual nature. And this guidance of spiritual nature is the definition of divine nature. Devi Prakriti. And that's the verse I just read, 9:13. So this promotion, you could say, through the surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, allows one to come to attain the status of a great soul, the Mahatma. And Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain the Mahatma's functioning. And this is what he says: because the Mahatma, so Kura in this discussion, knows perfectly well that Krishna is the cause of all causes, the original supreme person, he does not divert his attention to anything outside Krishna. So that's the purport from Bhagavad Gita 9:13. For example, such great souls, they're not concerned with the form of any demigod or any human being. And Akura had in fact stated this earlier. So everything connects so perfectly, because earlier on he had said, all the worlds with their presiding demigods and teeming populations originate in you, the inexhaustible supreme personality of Godhead. And that was from the 15th verse in the same chapter. So these great souls, such as Akura, meditate only upon Krishna and Krishna consciousness. That's why, we find this whole stream of statements, and it's extraordinary because there's no break in it. And the reason is that being completely situated in divine nature. And as Srila Baladev Vijayabhusan states, such persons, having accepted my spiritual Svarup, Diving Prakritim, having accepted with conviction, that was that verse Gnatva, or that word Gnatva, that I, with human form, am the cause of all living entities, humans, as well as Brahma and Shiva, Bhutadim, and that I am eternal, Avyayam, serve me. Akura serving Lord Krishna is by his praying to Lord Krishna. Of course, he's performing the external service of driving Krishna and Balaram to Mathura, but part of his service is praying to Lord Krishna. And hence, the words that he's using in today's verse, text 29, the source of all kinds of awareness and the predominator of the forces of nature that rule over the living being. So that's his prayer to Krishna, acknowledging that particular fact. So this idea that Krishna is in the background of the material world, and that the management is being conducted by material nature, is stated by Krishna himself, because he says, the material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. That's Bhagavad Gita 9:10. So the living entities, although born under the glance of the Supreme Lord, take their bodies according to their past activities and desires. So that's that component that Krishna's not directly involved. It has to do with the previous desires and activities of the living beings who take their particular form in a particular place in the cosmos. So Akura is acknowledging Krishna both as the source of knowledge and also as the super soul. Purusha, he says. And this is according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Because I've looked at how Krishna is the source of knowledge, but now looking at this component that he's also acknowledging the super soul aspect of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains that as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yogic systems, then the destination of abiding by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is reached. Because one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, so one is automatically following the dictation of super soul. That's Srila Prabhupada's explanation from Bhagavad Gita, purport 6.7. So the different kinds of awareness that Akura is mentioning in this, or attributing to the super soul, is possible because that same supreme controller is situated in the heart of everyone. And Srila Prabhupada gives this very interesting explanation for this. He says, the Supreme has legs and hands distributed everywhere, and that cannot be said of the individual soul. That is, Krishna has legs and hands distributed everywhere. So in fact, there are two knowers in the field of activity. So this is what's allowing for that different kinds of awareness, the presence of two knowers within one's heart. And that's what Akura is referring to, and hence we understand that he has this, he's acknowledging super soul. The super soul is understood by meditation, and indeed there's evidence from earlier on that Akura had been meditating on a particular form of the Lord, which I touched on earlier. So it all ties up what he's acknowledging, or what we can understand just from his statement, that there's, how does he put it? He is the embodiment of pure transcendental knowledge, the source of all kinds of awareness. Those are his words. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives another understanding of Akura seeing Krishna as the predominator of the forces of nature. He states, as time, so this is Srila Vishwanath giving an understanding of Akura's words, as time you control everyone and give the result of action. As Maya, you bind up the living entities, and as the Supreme, Brahman, you liberate them. So in one sentence, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur covers a lot of ground. As Bhagavan, you give us devotion to yourself, and thus your work is complete. So that's Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explaining something of the sequence and the arrangement made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that same Supreme Person says of himself, time I am the great destroyer of the worlds. And indeed, eventually he destroys all the different classes of entities residing in the world as though he's having a meal. So that's just through this agency of time. And as Maya, the living entities live under illusion. And as Bhagavan, one gets the opportunity to serve the Supreme Lord. So hence the Akura ends with the last verse that we read today. He ends with, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you because you are Vasudev, the resting place of all creation. You are the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you are also the Supreme Soul residing in everyone's heart and giving direction to act. Now, my Lord, I am completely surrendered unto you. Please give me your protection. So that was a rather intricate look at Akura's two statements in these two verses. I hope it was not too difficult, my attempt to examine it from both Krishna reinforcing something of Akura's understanding, analyzing Akura's position, and also bringing in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's simple, you could say, putting it in a simple way, a very vast amount of space that needed to be covered, or vast amount of concepts that needed to be covered. So if there's any thought on this, I'd be very happy to expand the discussion.
There is through the prayers, and is you brought that out, that across meditation and expressions is his worshipable Lord, the form of the Lord that he worships is Narayan, and um, and he addressed the Lord, you are Narayan. And as Narayan, you're the source of all things, everything comes to you. And he's, through the pastime, he's looking up to have the audience or the darshan of Krishna. And we know the famous part of the pastimes in which he sees the lotus prince of the prince of the lotus feet of Krishna in the sand, and rolls in ecstasy. So he's having that darshan with Krishna, the original supreme personality of Godhead, the source of everything, including Narayan. But it seems that the reciprocation that Krishna gives is to reinforce that relationship that he have with Lord Narayan, or with that form of the Lord. Different than, say, Uddhava, who wanted to be in Vrindavan in some simple form, to just, he didn't even aspire to be in a direct, in a more direct connection with Krishna, but rather in a form that will be just receiving the dust of the devotees of Krishna in Vrindavan as a blade of grass. So there is a difference. I'm saying this. I'm trying to make it up because I'm seeing that the reciprocation or the relationship remains more or less on that mood of awe and reverence. Like when you worship Lord Narayan, and it doesn't seem that Akrura have much. For sure, he have appreciation as a pure devotee, but not unlike Uddhava or unlike Lord Brahma. He wants to remain. He remains, in this relationship of Vaikunthavasi type. So it's a thought and trying to understand. More or less that's what I read. I'm sure there's more to it. That's my capacity of understanding that.
Oh, thank you very much for the insight. Yes, it's interesting. Coming up in the next chapter, there's going to be, he's had this vision of Vaikuntha presented to him while he's chanting his Diksha mantra, and he comes out of the water and he's in a particular state of ecstasy, And Krishna deals with him very personally. He says to him, judging by your appearance, I'm paraphrasing, but judging by your appearance, you've seen something very wonderful. So, very personal dealing of Krishna. And Akura, he goes back to exactly his, pretty much what you've pointed out here, that he goes back to his particular way of relating to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the prayers that follow are again very much like what we've been hearing. You're the cause of all causes, etc., etc. So he's, and I think this analysis today was to highlight that he's a great soul, and certainly your observation that he remains in the mood of relating to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Narayan. Indeed, it doesn't change, even with Krishna being very personal, and it gets to be witnessed a little bit in the next chapter, because he doesn't deal in a sort of a one-to-one, simple kind of exchange that's super intimate, not at all. It's again seeing the in a very reverential way. Yes, it doesn't change. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.